Okay. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of press, a lot of commentary of late about mergers, acquisitions, sales of financial planning practices. It's a hot topic and one we don't see as dissipating anytime in the near future. It will remain very topical. And very often in those sorts of transactions, there are activities that are important, that are necessary for success, and often they're not addressed at the initial levels of discussion. In this session, we'd like to touch upon 5 of those areas for your consideration. In any business, as our friend Genghis Khan would say, it is often easier to do the deal, to conquer, but to govern and to implement and to integrate effectively, you need to dismount, you need to get your hands, roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. That's the purpose of this discussion today. In any business, the most viable, most important asset is, of course, the client base. We have a client survey tool called a CAT scan. It's a client satisfaction survey which is conducted anonymously, confidentially on behalf of the advisor, the practice. We've had over 60,000 responses over time from clients. Here's what clients think of their advisor. This is not right or wrong. This simply points out within this context that the sale or the merger or the purchase have to realize these are the parameters of the clientele. Clients love their own advisor. Relationship has remained the top rated KPI ever since we started with the service some 20 years ago. Equally important in many ways are the support staff, thought of and rated very highly by the clients. Third area to touch on is range of financial services, the third bottom. Over time, we've noticed that clients' needs have changed, and in many ways, they're not feeling that their advisor is keeping up with their changing needs. They've gone from accumulators to retirees, for example. And the final area we'd like to touch on in this state of play analysis is communication. We do a lot of communication, advisors, financial planning practices do, with their clients. It's received, it's compliant, but in many ways their message is not getting through. So if you had to look at, here's the asset I am purchasing, relationship is number one, staff are very important to successful business, and therefore integration, needs are changing, and communication remains possibly a weaker link in the offer of the advisor. So that's the context. With that in mind, let's look at 5 of the areas we think are important in any sale, purchase, merger. Tony?
Thanks, Terry. And I think again, it's important, as Terry mentioned there, that what we're talking about here is a transaction. So the transaction could be a sale, could be a partial sale, a full sale, it could be a merger, it could be a succession plan. It could be, doing something to get scale. So basically, what we're going to talk about covers across all those different areas. The first one that we've got there is that basically, if I'm paying, I'm saying. So when you're looking at that transaction, whoever is the buyer, whoever is the person that wants to buy the business or buy the practice, buy a client base, they're going to want to have influence on what happens. So one of the other things then from a seller's perspective, if you're thinking about selling your book or selling part of your business, what is the level of involvement you are going to have in the ongoing operations of the business? Now, if you're selling and you're getting out, then the answer to that is probably not much at all. But in terms of the ongoing, having a seat at the table from a buyer is obvious. They have to have it. As a seller, that's something that you need to think about in terms of whatever that transaction might be. And again, it's not just operational, it also could be strategic, depending on the transaction and depending on the level of equity you have, depending what the plan is over a period of time. It could be, as an example, and we've basically, in the transactions that we've helped advisors with, we know that there are many There are many transactions where the buyer does not want the advisor to hang around, right? They're happy with buying the clients with the book of business. They're not really necessarily interested in buying the systems and the processes of that business because they've already got their own, right? So what they're interested in doing is handing over the clients, and then there is not necessarily going to be an ongoing role for the seller or for the person that's entering that transaction. So that is something that's very important to figure out or to discuss in that, when you're working out what the transaction is going to be, because when the transaction is done, this is something that if you haven't talked about, may very well happen. So basically, the whole thing about this is that the objective, as we'll talk about in a minute, the objective that the buyer has will mean that there will be some things that will and won't happen, and it's important to get those issues out on the table before the transaction is done, not after the transaction, because that's one of the ways that the piper will be paid, as we mentioned previously.
I just
Commentary?
think to clarify just a little bit, I think, and whilst it's important, those areas you mentioned, I think they're part of the agreement too. It's legal. If there's an expectation that the seller or the person exiting wants to stay on, that should be clarified and contained in an agreement. Otherwise,
should be, Terry. Should be.
That's
correct.
right. I think that's the important point. It's making sure that we're all on the same page from the very minute. And if the ultimate aim is to sell or exit, well, that should be the primary, goal. Clarify that as well. But anyone who draws the check is entitled to a say in how the money's spent. Really. Thanks, Tony.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it is.
The second one is basically, again, with a lot of these things, and this is a saying that we've used a lot over the years. It's not personal, it's business. And basically, in terms of business, then the purpose of the transaction may vary across. There could be a number of different reasons. Again, it could be to increase scale. It could be to leverage infrastructure. It could be to access a particular market, acquire a capability, whether that's an advisor or a power planner or something like that. But at the end of the day, I think whatever that transaction is, there will be a reason for it. So as a seller, it's got to be it's very important then to understand what the purpose of the transaction is from the buyer's perspective. From a buyer, it's also important to understand what it is that you want to achieve, because a lot of these things that we're going to address here, as Terry mentioned before, a lot of these things need to be included in the agreement. Sometimes we see that those things aren't necessarily included in the agreement. The only thing that's really discussed at a high level is what the price is and what the terms are, and a lot of the other stuff can be left unsaid. Right? Well, again, that's not in the best interest of anybody, we don't think. Okay, so again, in terms of scale and infrastructure, as I mentioned previously, it could be that they want another advisor and they want a power planner and they want staff. Which again, as the seller of the business, that's fantastic. Or even as somebody who's looking at merging their business, if the purchaser, if all they really want is scale, or if they've already got scale and what they want clients to leverage that scale, then it could be that perhaps that not all the employees will be needed. It could be that not all of the infrastructure will be needed for those advisors who own their office in a self-managed super fund. So again, it's very important for the seller to understand, to make sure they know exactly what they're looking at trying to do. And it's also important from the seller's perspective to say, this is what the buyer wants to do and this is how I'm going to fit in. And even in that transaction, if the seller can understand what the buyer is looking for, the seller can position their business position their business so it's more attractive to the buyer, and in theory then perhaps even get a little bit of higher capital value there. So, but I think the constant always is that the return on that investment, whether that be, generally speaking, it's going to be profitability, or it's going to be client numbers, or it's going to be whatever that may be, but generally speaking, it's going to be profitability. So that's very important to understand. Terry?
I think, well, if the transaction doesn't result in a profitability level, there's no business. So, you can't give advice. You can't run a business without achieving a desired level of profitability. So, yeah, it's got to, at the end of the day, stack up financially. There's got to be milestones along the way, goals that are clear. And going to your point, Tony, I think with the selling or exiting partner, what are those milestones for success? What are the triggers? Clarity up front gets rid of a lot of the issues that we often see emerge after the initial agreement's reached.
And I think the other thing on that, Terry, is that, whatever the measures of success are, the more objective they are, the better as
They
well.
have to be objective. No doubt about that, Tony. No doubt.
Righto. So there, basically that's what we sort of talked about: defined, measurable, achievable milestones. Again, it's not
Yep.
it's not personal. If they don't want your staff, or if they don't want you, it's not a personal slight. It's simply what the transaction is trying to achieve. It's business. It's not personal. Third one we've got there is clients. Now this is pretty important, and I think the moniker we've got there is the less alignment mean that there's more implications. So what this simply means is, when you're looking at merging two businesses together, or a sale, or a buy or a sale, the less alignment between the two, or multiple organisations that are in the transaction, the less alignment with the clients, the more possible that there is going to be implications, particularly from a client perspective. So if you look at things like, particularly like demographics, younger client base versus an older client base, if you look at the fees that are being charged, not just necessarily the level of fees, but also the way that those fees are derived. So a lot of businesses still, they're asset based. So basically the fees are derived from something that's asset based. Other businesses are moving towards a more flat dollar fee. Again, while neither of those are right or wrong, they both certainly work. If there's a difference between the two, it means that one of those group of clients may very well have to change the fee that they're paying, possibly increase the fee, or change the way that fee is calculated. So again, not right or wrong, not good or bad, but a change. The client value proposition also just probably comes back back to demographics to a certain degree. A predominantly retired client base of a value proposition of helping people grow their money for retirement may not necessarily fit. So again, is the value aligned to a specific group of people, or specific demographics? Is it accumulation? Is it in retirement? Is it younger accumulation, older accumulation? All of these things are very need discussion in terms of that overall strategic view moving forward. Revenue per client we mentioned, and even in the products and services in this value proposition, if a business is buying, if a business is buying where they've got an accumulated client base, or buying an older client base, do they have the access to the products and services that are being offered to that older client base, like annuities, like Centrelink, like aged care, like help in getting into retirement villages and those sorts of things? And perhaps buying that client base, it's not just about buying the client base, as we mentioned previously. It could also be about buying the expertise and buying the experience in that new products and services, which again could then expand the products and services in the buyer's in the buyer's business. Conversely, if they're buying a client base and they haven't got the infrastructure to supply those products and services, they either need to find that infrastructure, or they need to find somewhere else for the clients to go. So it could be then that even though the clients are bought en masse, it could be that they may not necessarily stay with the buyer. They may then have to find a new home again from a seller. That's something that needs to be addressed. Systems and processes we mentioned before, and it's not just about the systems and processes per se. What it's about is the clients may have a different experience, right? So the clients that are being sold may have a different experience in the way that they in the review process or the ROAs or the advice or whatever it might be. It might be different. Okay, so again, that's something that needs to be considered as well. The advisor they're dealing with, the types of advisors they're dealing with, where they need to go to do their review. Is it online? Is it still in the office? All of those things will need to be addressed. And I think the key thing there, as Terry mentioned in very early on, is it's about communication to the clients and what they can expect.
Yeah,
Terry?
just to reiterate, I think the less alignment between client sets, the more implications it has. As I said, it's not right or wrong, but it needs to be considered and addressed. What are you going to do about it? And I think a classic example is the level of fees. If practice A has got an average fee of $5,000 and practice B per client has one of $10,000, there's a distinct difference. So what does it mean in terms of bringing them together? That's the consideration for all parties to the transaction, Tony.
Fair enough. The fourth one is staff. Now, as we mentioned previously, it could be that this transaction, buying, selling, merging, that the staff are wanted. It could be maybe that the staff aren't needed. And I think there's a famous song in the 80s there, Terry, but we won't talk about that. But basically, we've got two tribes. So we've got two different ways that people do business. So how are those two sets of staff going to be compatible if the plan is to integrate those two staff? And there's important issues there around things like performance management, job descriptions, how often the performance management is done, objective, the performance whether the staff members are doing a good job. Do they have objective performance measures? Are they capable? What is the capability of the current people versus the roles that the new business wants them to play? Again, their attitude, it could be a very, very small business going into a larger business. It could be that, that the business being purchased, the staff there may do everything themselves. They may be chief cook and bottle washer, and they do everything the way that they want it when they want it. If they're going into a new situation where there are going to be constraints, if you like, or certainly guidelines, new systems and new processes, they're things there that need to be communicated, and not just communicated, but I think sold to the new people coming on board, if in fact they're wanted. Again, staff development, career paths, what career paths are available, what development, what training are included. It could be that, again, staff coming on board, new staff coming on board may be very keen to have a clear career progression. They may have been promised something in their previous role with their previous job. Those things are also important. Work from home, that's been certainly a key issue, a key conversation since COVID, and again, how it's offered work from home, how it's managed is also very important. Really, I think in this day and age, it's not whether it's offered, it's how it's offered. But again, if one business does completely work from home and one business doesn't, again, there's going to need to be a transition process in place and a clear understanding of what is expected and what is needed. Remuneration also, we've seen situations where you have a transaction occur. You've got two people with the titles of paraplanner. Effectively, they've both got the same job descriptions, but because of history or experience or whatever it might be, that their remuneration, their pay structure is very different. And I think one of the other things we found, Terry, is that irrespective of how confidential things are, these things get out, right? They always get out. So how you manage that difference in remuneration, the difference in structure, that's also something that is going to need clear consideration and communication and understanding as well. So basically, again, when there's two groups of, buying, selling, merging, uh, the key takeout there is that there needs to be a clear understanding as to what the path forward is and how that affects the staff in terms of the high level strategic and operational. And the operational stuff, I think there we've outlined a fair bit there, Terry.
Yeah, I think so. I think it simply is recognising that there could be differences in all those areas you've listed there, Tony. Not right, not wrong, but what are you going to do about it? Don't let them simmer below the surface. Address them, whether it is working from home, whether it is someone's got a bonus program, someone doesn't, someone likes to work from home, someone doesn't. It doesn't matter. Recognise nothing right or wrong, recognise and have a plan to address and open and frank communication through things we call the State of the Nation, where you report regularly as to your progress of an integration are critical. Not right or wrong, just recognise it and move on. That's all.
Yep. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So number 5, BAU, is business as usual. Now, one of the things that I must admit I have a little chuckle every time I see a merger of a large business, particularly of a large business or even a medium-sized business, is that don't worry, everything will be business as usual. People will stay in their jobs and everything will remain the same and kumbaya and everyone loves each other. Sorry to tell you, but it doesn't happen. Business as usual does not happen. Everything changes at some stage. It may take a little bit longer than others, but business, generally speaking, is not as usual. To give you some examples, again, in a transaction, technology, Xplan or not Xplan, IntelliFlow or Midwinter or Advisor Logic. Some people will say that we have built our technology platform and you guys need to assimilate. Other people may say you can run whatever you want in the short term, but at the end of the day, as we go back to that conversation that Terry mentioned at the very, very start about it has to be profitable and it has to be efficient. The only way that you're going to get efficiency and therefore profitability in any one business is if there is a shared technology platform and that is leveraged across the entire group. So technology may change. Okay, it's not necessarily a big deal, but for those of you who've been through a technology change, if you've changed from one provider to another, it's not necessarily a straightforward operation. It can be difficult, it can be time consuming, and it also can affect your client experience. So there's just one little way that it could work. In terms of the culture, again, a small business culture to a large business culture, those things.
It hasn't got to be big, large, or small. It can just be cultures, Tony. I think.
But as an example,
no,
right, there
yeah,
could be some serious issues there. But
yeah.
correct, if there are different cultures in the two organisations, again, the buyer or the key driver in this transaction generally will be the ones that will implement and make their culture the norm as opposed to the other way around. Okay, that's the way that things happen. Standards, compliance. Again, there may be different compliance expectations. There may be different compliance procedures. We've seen businesses go from having one review a year in a compliance perspective to having to have every one of their SOAs signed off by compliance before it goes to the client. Again, right or wrong, good or bad, not for us to decide, simply saying that it could be a change. So whatever those changes are, it will not be business as usual, because having a compliant business and adhering to the compliance regime and rules and standards and expectations is not negotiable. The philosophy of the business, again, client focused, investment, even the investment process, the way that investments are done, all of those things are up for grabs moving forward, including communication.
Well, they're not up for grabs. They're up to be considered by the buyer and the seller or the merger.
You say potato, I say potato. Basically, what it means is that it's not going to stay the same necessarily, right?
Necessarily,
yeah. The communication to clients, communications to staff, may change. Again, in-person versus virtual, whether that be client communication, Terry, as we mentioned before, or even, again, dealing with staff, dealing with work from home could be different. Digital advice, the role, if any, that digital advice plays in the practice at the moment and moving forward, that could also have some serious implications. So basically, again, the issue is I think the thing to learn here is that be very wary of business as usual. It may be business as usual for a little while, but at the end of the day, to achieve the financial outcomes of the transaction, it can't be. The business has to leverage the systems and the processes and the technology and the people management that they've got. It can only be one system if they're going to maximise efficiency and profitability. So be aware of that.
Yeah, I think
You want
the
to add to
bottom,
that, Terry?
just to say that a pragmatic approach always, there's no right. There may be between parties different views, but one view will be better, more suited to the new business. Keep an open mind and be pragmatic about the eye on the prize, as we said earlier. What's the end objective for the whole transaction? So yeah, it's to recognise all those points are very important, and they should be addressed in those early stages of discussion. And due diligence will pick a lot of that stuff up as well, Tony. I think.
Fantastic.
Yep. Okay.
So there are 5 areas,
Yep.
Terry.
Let's go through them, Tony. If the person drawing the check has the final say, naturally so. Nothing right or wrong with that. If I'm paying, I'm saying. It is business. It's business after all, and the end goal is to remain profitable and to grow and to be able to deliver the service you want to your client base. So the business rules at the end. Client demographics are very important. Client alignment between two sets of clients, and they are, as we've said before, the most valuable asset of the business in any event. Closely followed by staff. Again, 2 lots of people working. They'll have different approaches, different views. They'll feel the fact that a transaction of any sort has happened will naturally cause questions in some areas of concern. So communication, being aware of that and addressing any possible misalignments up front is critical, and don't underestimate the power of the one-on-one meeting or call. How's things going? How can we make it a bit easier or clarify for you? Business as usual. Yep, there'll be differences in platforms and in standards and everything. Recognize that there'll be change along the way, and to act accordingly, really. Thanks, Tony. And we can wrap it up simply by saying we have a whole range of services. We do a lot of this stuff. Tony, you're doing a couple as we speak now. So these are sort of things we touch on. If anyone listening has a need or wants to ask a question or to talk things through, there's our details. Reach out. We'd love to have a chat.
Yep, and I think,
Thank you, Tony.
and again, our experience that in going through these, and again, buying, selling, a merger, a succession plan, a true succession plan of younger advisors coming through and taking equity over a period of time. All of these things, and I think hopefully what we've done is we've sort of outlined that there's a lot of issues to consider. So getting that external viewpoint can be very, very important. And obviously that's what we do. So business valuations, information memorandums can be really, really important. One of the things that we found around the data, client base and revenue analysis can be really, really important in presenting the business for sale and understanding the business that you're buying. So all of those things are really, really important. If you want to thinking about selling or thinking about buying, we can certainly help, and we can certainly help you think about, make sure that all of the issues are covered. Be a sounding board, bounce ideas off. So again, yeah, we'd love to be involved. So basically, as this is one of the favourites, it's not necessarily how smart you are. A lot of people are really smart. All this is about adapting to change, and that's pretty much our role in it. So thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate your attention. We'll continue to do these webinars moving forward. If anyone's got any questions at all, please feel to reach out to anyone, to Terry, Rod, or I. And thanks very much, and look forward to catching up at some stage in the future.
Thanks, Tony. Take care.
Right, recording.